Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you can be here despite the stormy weather. We've heard from one of our speakers today that he's already seen half a tree come down in the next garden. So we hope everybody's going to get safely through this experience and not have to attend to any tree emergencies. So my name is Tina Fawcett. I'm a senior researcher in the energy policy team at the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford. And I'm here because I'm a co-I of the EPSRC Network Plus for decarbonisation of heating and cooling. And that, in fact, is the network which is putting on this event. It's the second one we've done this year. And it's part of a series where we're looking at different challenges of decarbonising heating and cooling sectors and behaviours and policy and legal aspects and many different aspects of this huge challenge that we've all got. This week we've got two speakers on the subject of geothermal warmth and the future of home heating. And they're going to be providing thoughts from a regulatory and from a policy perspective. We're aiming to continue this monthly seminar series as a way of exchanging knowledge and building community on these issues. It's been very popular so far. We hope that continues to be the case. Please get in touch with feedback. If you've got any suggestions for future speakers, if you'd like to propose yourself as a future speaker, that's great. And if you're not already on our mailing list, then please do ask to be added. And so then you will get full information about what's coming up next, because webinars are not the only thing that we do as a network. So there's other events you might be interested in too. I'm now very pleased to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Richard Hanna, who is a researcher at the Centre for Environmental Policy at Imperial College London. He carries out systematic evidence reviews for the UK Energy Research Centre, also known as UKERC, and he specialises in topics relating to energy, technology, innovation and low carbon heating policy. And as we've already said, his title today is The Future of Home Heating. Richard's currently leading a review of the international evidence on net job creation in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And he's been involved in a number of previous very interesting projects, including timescales from basic research to commercialization of energy technologies and consumer products, and international review of the best practices in heat decarbonisation with a focus on heat pumps and district heating deployment. And also work on the extent to which energy scenarios and energy systems models represent disruptive or discontinuous change in energy systems. So a lot of really interesting work there. And I'm now going to hand over to Richard for his presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Tina. This is my presentation is based on a briefing paper that I co-authored for the Energy Futures Lab at Imperial College London. And this is part of a series of briefing papers that the Energy Futures Lab produces. This particular paper was actually slightly different from some of the previous in that Energy Futures Lab did a briefing paper on smart heating a year or two ago. But in this case, this was actually work commissioned by the Microgeneration Certification Scheme Charitable Foundation and carried out by Imperial College London consultants. So sort of a quick disclaimer that presentation represents the independent opinion of myself as an author and the conclusions and recommendations that we came up with as a collective of authors for this work. But I'd also like to very much credit Amy Trask, who was another researcher who worked particularly on the hydrogen parts of this report. I worked a bit more on the heat pumps part, so I guess my expertise lies there. So I'll take you into summarising the report contents and conclusions. So by way of introduction, I think I'm glad to see that Anna and I have had the same 23% statistic here, but obviously heating sector in the UK is heavily reliant on natural gas, as well as being responsible for 23% of UK emissions. And across Europe and some other selected countries as shown in the charts, the UK is second only to the Netherlands in terms of the share of residential and non-residential heating demand provided by natural gas. So it's around 85% of homes heated by natural gas in the UK. So And in particular, given the current energy price crisis, it's really crucial that efforts to decarbonise domestic heating are stepped up. So in this report, partly as a function of the scope, we focused on hydrogen heat pumps only. We recognise that heat networks will also have a very important role to play in the transition to contributing to a net zero transition from heating, and even more so and above all of these low carbon heat interventions, energy efficiency is the first and most important intervention that can be made. But we don't consider energy efficiency in heat networks in the scope of this report or in a detailed way, only in passing. So we identified some general barriers to implementation in the report. So first of all, building energy efficiency, as you're probably well aware, the UK's housing stock being one of the oldest and least firmly efficient in Europe, and therefore a comprehensive programme of improvements and retrofitting buildings is urgently needed and would be beneficial regardless of low carbon heating technologies installed. This would help to reduce heating demand and optimise the performance of heat pumps or hydrogen boilers. Now, there's also a key priority area is industry skills and training. So number of trained installers, both with the skills needed to install heat pumps, the number of installers needs to be scaled up substantially to support a low carbon heat transition. So there's significant shortages of skilled workers in heat pump installation and maintenance. And also gas boiler installers do not currently have the necessary skills to install hydrogen boilers. And then there's also an issue of public awareness. In that at least to date, low carbon heating is still largely unfamiliar or poorly understood. And there's at least a couple of recent surveys that suggest that there's low public awareness that gas boilers contribute to climate change. Has actually been an explosion of media coverage in recent weeks on low carbon heat, but the effect of that's yet to be evaluated in reliable surveys. I'll now cover in turn hydrogen and heat pumps. And in the report, we structured this by first looking at supply aspects, then demand, looking at barriers to uptake and policies. And generally the way we approached this was to do a narrative review of selected literature, but also drawing on previous systematic reviews that I've carried out with others on international experience of implementation of low carbon heating technologies. So on hydrogen, no carbon dioxide is produced when hydrogen is combusted. However, a key problem with hydrogen at the moment is that 97% of hydrogen production globally is currently reliant on fossil fuels. So this, in terms of colour of hydrogen, this could be from coal, so referred to as black, brown hydrogen, or from natural gas known as grey hydrogen. So low carbon hydrogen production would need to be from fossil fuels combined with carbon capture and storage, which is referred to as blue hydrogen, or from renewable electricity known as green hydrogen. And in the slides to come, I'll discuss some of the issues with those forms. One potential advantage of hydrogen is that the consumer experience of hydrogen boilers in domestic settings are likely to be similar to the experience of gas boilers once installed, but there are a number of other very important challenges involved in actually getting to that point. And UK hydrogen production capacity is currently 3 to 5 gigawatts, but this, of course, is mainly not low carbon hydrogen. In the UK's industrial decarbonisation strategy, this includes plans to use low carbon hydrogen in industrial clusters. So one key idea with hydrogen is that the UK's extensive gas grid could be repurposed for transporting hydrogen. And as luck would have it, the Iron Mains Replacement Programme initiated in 2002 and for reasons of public safety involves the replacement of iron pipelines with polyethylene plastic pipes, which are more suitable for hydrogen distribution. However, in terms of transmission, there would also need to be a replacement of steel pipelines in the transmission network. These would need to be repurposed at least, and this would come with a high cost. Although the consumer experience of hydrogen boilers could be similar to gas boilers once installed, homes would require individual home surveys and may often require replacement of existing gas pipework, and would require the installation of hydrogen compatible appliances or modification of existing appliances to be suitable for use with hydrogen. In terms of the barriers to implementation of hydrogen, so as I mentioned, there's very limited low carbon hydrogen production sources in the UK. This is refers to very limited production of green hydrogen, but we're talking very small amounts. And green hydrogen production is not yet cost competitive, more expensive to produce than blue hydrogen, and much greater capacity of renewables would be needed to produce it. And with respect to blue hydrogen, there's no operating carbon capture and storage in the UK at a commercial scale. So this is a key problem that would need to be overcome. Otherwise, clearly blue hydrogen cannot be low carbon. And CCS infrastructure globally has not been deployed on anticipated scales. So again, this would be something that would need to be scaled up extensively and rapidly, and is a key barrier to blue hydrogen being realised. So large volumes of hydrogen would also need to be stored to meet peak heating demands. And there's a lot of research still needs to be done into hydrogen storage. There has been some research on hydrogen storage in salt caverns. There are various safety risks associated with that would need to be managed. And of course, there are safety concerns with the safe use of hydrogen within residences, and ensuring safe use is essential. And so this is a priority for forthcoming hydrogen trials. Now, as I mentioned, hydrogen doesn't produce carbon dioxide or at the point of combustion. Also, it doesn't produce carbon monoxide, but a key issue with the higher flame temperatures of hydrogen is production of NOx emissions. So again, this would need to be managed. And household costs, well, there are estimates that suggest that the overall costs of pipework, hydrogen boilers and appliances would be upwards of £3,000 per household. Policy support and regulation. So I mentioned hydrogen trials. The government plans to support a programme of trials, so full hydrogen heating trials in local neighbourhoods by next year, in larger villages by 2025, and building up to a pilot hydrogen town by the end of the decade. But in actual fact, the government is going to they've committed to making a strategic decision on the future use of hydrogen in heating in homes in 2026, based on the evidence gathered so far, for example, through trials and research and demonstration. And there is a £240 million net zero hydrogen fund. This would support low carbon hydrogen deployments, but it's unclear how much will be used for domestic heating. The government has also consulted on business models last year to incentivise the production and use of low carbon hydrogen, with the aim of reducing the cost gap between low carbon hydrogen and fossil fuel hydrogen produced without CCS. Also, there's a recent government consultation on developing low carbon hydrogen standards, which would help to develop the market and create demand by distinguishing hydrogen by origin and making it clear which sources are actually and genuinely low carbon. That's hydrogen. So moving swiftly on to heat pumps. So heat pumps offer low carbon alternatives to natural gas boilers. They typically provide space and water heating in homes. Some reversible heat pumps can also supply cooling. Heat pumps are powered by electricity, so they allow for heat to be transferred efficiently from the air, ground or water into a building, used similar to a fridge operating in reverse. And in terms of carbon intensity, air and ground source heat pumps have been found to produce around 0.1 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilowatt hours, and this is half the equivalent carbon intensity of gas boilers. So that's one particular study. Now, a key issue is the supply chain for heat pumps. So as mentioned, most homes in the UK connected to the gas grid, but in 2020, the total stock of heat pumps in the UK was just over 250,000 compared to 29 million households in the UK. So to meet net zero in the UK, heat pumps, at least according to the Committee on Climate Change, would be needed in around 18 million homes. So our installed stock compares to installed stocks of several million in countries such as France or Sweden, well, 2 to 3 million. And in the graph on the right, which shows installed heat pumps per 1,000 households in different European countries, you can see the UK is the second lowest there, with 7 per 1,000 households installed, compared to, say, Norway, which has over half of households with installed heat pumps. So in the UK, there's just over, well, or maybe around 1,000 installation companies, depending on what you read. And there's only several domestic manufacturers. So there's definitely a need to both vastly upscale qualified installers and companies, and also to develop more local manufacturing. Whereas boilers in the UK, for example, 55% of demand is met by domestic manufacturers. So there is some potential for transferability from boilers and air conditioners, which use some similar components and may require some similar skills to their production that would be used in the manufacturing of heat pumps. And in the UK, we could learn from other European countries where manufacturers use the same facilities for the production of air conditioners and heat pumps. Moving on to barriers to implementation for heat pumps. A well-charted barrier is installation and upfront purchase costs. So typical cost of installing the most common kind of heat pump in the UK, air to water, is at least around £9,000 and several times the cost of replacing a gas boiler. This is a key problem, and there's no really sort of compelling evidence about how the cost can be reduced substantially. And indeed, I've got a colleague working on this at the moment. So whilst it's likely that some cost reductions could be achieved through economies of scale or making installation processes more efficient, it's likely that we're going to need also more sort of flexible financial incentives and green financing mechanisms. Financial incentives for heat pumps have been available in the UK over the last 15 years, but these have been very stop-start and inconsistent in terms of what's being incentivised, whether it's upfront or running costs. And even the latest boiler upgrade grant proposed by the government to run from this year for 3 years would only support around 90,000 heat pumps in terms of the level of funding committed. Another key barrier to uptake is that the UK electricity price still incorporates policy costs of renewables investment compared to natural gas, which doesn't incorporate so much of the cost of decarbonisation. So this is a sort of perverse incentive that really ought to be corrected to maximise the potential to reduce running costs from heat pumps. And the UK could certainly learn from what other countries have done in this regard. Heat pumps also require competent installation to maximise performance and efficiency. Energy efficiency or adequate installation definitely helps to maximise performance of low temperature heat pumps in a lot of cases. Also, there may still be issues with oversized or thicker radiators needing to be installed and greater space requirements for heat pumps compared to gas combi boilers. So this is where maybe innovation into, say, high temperature heat pumps could be useful. Another concern, impacts on total and peak electricity demand. So heat demand from heat pumps is likely to contribute to increasing total electricity demand overall, even if the impacts on demand is more distributed across the day. And so therefore there's likely to be either a need to reinforce local distribution networks or need for thermal storage or smart heating flexibility. So I think I'm probably running out of time, but just coming to the last few slides here. But there have been several studies comparing the costs of future scenarios of moving to low carbon heat using heat pumps and hydrogen. So there was a study carried out for the Committee on Climate Change in 2018 that indicated that the overall system costs of moving to hydrogen or electrification through heat pumps were relatively similar, but somewhat cheaper for electrified heating pathways. And there's an International Council on Clean Transportation study shown in the charts that projected the annual household cost of low carbon heating options in 2050 and found that these would be lowest for heat pumps. And just an addendum here that there was some recent potentially erroneous coverage in the Daily Mail and Telegraph about the running costs of heat pumps being very, very high, but there has been a recent study by the Regulatory Assistance Project, which has found that the running costs for heat pumps would be lower than gas boilers after the price cap goes up in April, based on a COP of 3 for air source heat pumps, if I recollect correctly. In terms of policy support, I mentioned that the UK should follow examples from Germany and France by looking to include either a carbon price in the cost of gas bills or transferring policy costs from electricity bills to general taxation. Now, this is not something we've looked into detail, but certainly I think there needs to be a discussion about which of these types of mechanisms would be fairest and how they could work. The government should also be supporting schemes and products which provide access to affordable capital towards installation costs of heat pumps, such as mortgage additions, tax credits and low interest loans. And some of these mechanisms have already been implemented in countries such as France, Germany and Italy, which in recent years have had quite high rates of heat pump installation across Europe. In Sweden and Switzerland, we could also learn from examples of long-term policy support for heat pump rollout, in particular support for long-term test centres, which have helped to raise technical standards over time and provide quality assurance in the UK. The last national UK field trial was concluded in 2013, and heat pump industry representation is somewhat fragmented. So I think that there needs to be more coordination to ensure that technological innovation can both improve products and help to reduce their costs. And as I hinted at before, there's also potential to engage consumers through smart heat and flexibility and heat as a service business models. Just to wrap up, so on the final recommendations, I mentioned about shifting of energy levies away from electricity and introduction of green financing schemes. We also recommend that longer term grants really need to be implemented beyond what's supported by, say, the boiler upgrade scheme could run for 10 years, but certainly there is quite a support shortfall in terms of the amount of funding that would be required to roll out the amount of heat pumps needed. So the government, of course, has a target of installing 600,000 heat pumps by 2028. We also recommend that UK heat pump manufacturing is developed through policy support and incentives for UK manufacturers of technologies such as gas boilers and air conditioners to shift or diversify production to heat pumps. So this could operate through a quota model where manufacturers have to progressively increase the proportion of heat pumps that they produce as a proportion of total heating products. And based on what I said about the fragmentation of heat pump industry representation, we recommend that following examples from what's been proposed elsewhere, that a heat pump council be established comprising members from national, local government, regulators, industry and civil society. And this would help to coordinate consumer engagement with heat pump deployment and oversee the operation of a national research, testing and training facility for heat pumps. So these last 2 points have been proposed elsewhere by Richard Lowes and Jan Rosenow, and it's certainly something that we would endorse. And then finally, my last slide, as I mentioned, flexibility. So there's further clarity really needed on the role of hybrid heat pumps and their potential role in taking advantage of time of use price differences and engaging users through heat as a service business models. We also recommend that overall it may be wiser to prioritise low carbon hydrogen strategically in hard to electrify sectors such as industry and shipping. This is because of key issues with rolling out carbon capture and storage, or the amount of renewables capacity that would be required for low carbon hydrogen. So it may just be better used in sectors that are currently difficult to decarbonise. Of course, mention the consultation to define standards for low carbon hydrogen, and we support that. In terms of green hydrogen, development of electrolyzers does need to be increased, at least through demonstration projects, to improve cost effectiveness of green hydrogen. But overall, we would recommend that certainly UK policy very much focuses on deploying currently available solutions such as energy efficiency, electrification through heat pumps and heat networks, which we've not considered in detail, but certainly are a key part of Committee on Climate Change scenarios and government's latest heat and building strategy. So thank you very much.